Thank you, Eno. Okay, this is the topic of my paper. Guido, can I please have the lights down?
Yeah.
Okay, I think many of you are familiar with these blockbuster movies, Pirates of the Caribbean. And there's this image of piracy being swashbuckling, romantic, exciting, dramatic, with these pirates with eye patches and parrots and things. But really, this image, the popular image of piracy, romantic image, is not the reality of modern piracy, which is something rather more scary. Terrorism, kidnapping, danger, war, and economic dislocation. And when I first heard about this conference, and Wim kindly invited me to present a paper, I thought, wow, you know, commodities, we're looking at resources and scarcity, but not just how they're produced and where and when, but the shipment and distribution of these products and basic commodities, and they're being impacted by modern piracy. Now, this is the image of modern piracy. Okay, a bunch of pirates at the top there, probably Somalis, holding handheld rocket launchers and AK-47s. There's the crew who are captured, and underneath is an inspector come to see that their period of being in captivity of about 4 months. They're still maintaining their health and they're being looked after. And this is an example of a vessel called the Faina, was captured for 6 weeks at this stage, went on to be still retained for about 4 months and released on payment of a ransom of about $4 million, carrying tanks, military equipment from Ukraine. Okay, what are we looking at here in terms of the importance of the impact of piracy on worldwide trade? We're looking at a very large number of products that are carried by sea. And, you know, all dry cargoes, cereals, a lot of food products, clothing, cars. Very many products are coming by sea. And what does the threat of piracy actually mean to that distribution of products? Well, longer voyages is more expensive, fuel costs, freight rates, insurance up, very high security costs for ship owners in terms of providing equipment and training, and also if they're unlucky enough to be captured successfully by the pirates, then having to pay the ransoms. Or that's at least that's the decision they've been taking. And well, how does this impact generally? Well, it's bound to increase cost of living and decreasing value of salaries and overall inflation. Now, over the first quarter of this year alone, piracy has increased enormously. So we've seen in the first few months of this year, pirates attacking 142 vessels and successfully seized 18, including 3 tankers over 100,000 tons deadweight. 7 crew members were killed and 34 injured. Now, piracy areas are especially focused on this coastal area by Somalia, but not limited to this area, because there have been piracy attacks further south and off West Africa and in the Indonesia area and off South America. Okay, now why am I interested in studying piracy? Well, this is my own modest vessel, a 40-foot sailing vessel. But even people who venture into perhaps the wrong parts of the world can be captured even in a small vessel. I prepared this research for this conference, and I haven't done a huge amount of research yet, but there is a ton of stuff out there. And my first initial look on EBSCO and looking for articles revealed a massive literature on this field. My doctoral thesis was in shipping, capital formation, the shipping industry, deployment of tonnage, an area of immediate interest. And also I've become interested in the super yacht industry. Most of this paper is based on secondary material, but also interviews with Captain Carrington Wood, who had more than 30 years' experience in the Royal Navy, including anti-piracy missions, who's the captain of a super yacht, which is, 10 times bigger than my own modest vessel, and worth at least 10, 15 million, maybe $20 million. So pirates could grab this very easily and want to have 3 or 4 million in a ransom. Okay, now the biggest vessel ever captured by pirates, the Sirius Star. This is a seriously huge vessel. This is, again, 10 times the size of the super yacht. So if you think about 10 times, mine's very small, then 10 times bigger, then 10 times bigger again. Now, for pirates to capture a ship this big, it's 330 meters. This happened in November, a few years ago, 450 miles off Kenya. The pirates needed to tie ropes to grappling hooks and throw them up onto the deck, because this vessel is the height of Big Ben in London, if you can imagine that. It was carrying 2 million barrels of oil worth 110 million. And when this ship was captured, it actually changed the price of oil in world markets because it made such a big difference. So ship itself is worth 100 million. I was taken to Somalia, and the ship and 25 crew were freed after about 3 months on payment of a 3 million ransom. The pirates, who would actually take phone calls made to the ship while it was in captivity, said, oh no, we think that it's worth a 25 million ransom. Oh look, quality, size, there's a lot of value to this. And they were trying to negotiate to get 25 million, but 3 million was paid. Okay, what are we talking about here in terms of impact? Again, to go back to our conference topic. I'm not sure that I'm completely right by saying this, but it struck me that this concept of biting the hand that feeds you. Because many of these ships, not the Sirius Star, but there was the Maersk Alabama was also captured, was carrying food aid from the US to Kenya. It was captured by pirates. It was in captivity for long enough for all the food to perish on board, so it's not getting to the country it's designed for. The pirates are getting rich, and ironically, some of the governments in Africa are helping the pirates to launder the ransom money by allowing them to purchase real estate, highly taxed, so they're making money too. But this food aid is just not getting to the countries that need it. Okay, the definition of piracy, there are a number of different definitions. And you can see the International Maritime Organization definition mentions armed robbery, but the International Maritime Board doesn't mention that aspect of it. Okay, now, just before I finish this, I'm not here to make a moral pronouncement about piracy being a bad thing. It is a business. It has no shortage of pirates volunteering to be pirates, has very wealthy pirate organization owners. The authorities are not really dealing with the issue as much as they might, and this will come up in discussion, I'm sure. The opposing forces are very disunited. So it is a business. But if we go back to some of our earliest things that we've talked about at this conference, responsible leadership and sustainable business. We could say that maybe from that point of view, we can see that there's an ethical issue here, because you've got some people getting very rich and many other people getting very poor. Okay, now, what are some of the ways in which we could combat piracy? First of all, we could try to avoid pirate-infested waters. And this is what many ships are doing. And if you can imagine a voyage from Yokohama to Bremen, and this is it's quite a long journey. Okay, how much would this cost you if you're carrying your cargo, and we're assuming 10 knots of speed, and we're assuming daily operating costs of about $7,000, it's going to cost you substantially more to avoid the Suez Canal and go on the Cape Horn route. And if you look at the numbers, okay, you've got you've got nearly 71 days at sea compared with less than 50. You're going nearly 17,000 nautical miles. And you're spending nearly $500,000 compared with 335,000 by the shorter Suez route. But the Suez route is quite pirate infested, so you're taking a chance. Okay, at the moment, the pirates are not necessarily hitting very large numbers, and also they're not successful all the time, but they do have a hit rate of over 10%, which, double-digit hit rate is obviously quite good in business as far as they're concerned. Okay, other ways of combating piracy, and this is using research from the interview with the Navy captain. Speed. He created this idea of the 4 S's. Speed, size, scariness, and safety. Now, speed, okay, fast ships are harder for pirates to catch. But how fast do you have to sail to be safe? Okay, 18 knots, 20 knots? Now, sailing that fast compared with 10 knots is very expensive. Your extra usage of fuel is enormous. Size, we've seen that a ship that's over 300 meters can be captured. So you've got to be very big. But if you think about the size of ships has increased in recent times. And so this is China Shipping Group launched 2005, 9,800 20-foot container equivalent unit vessels. But how long before these are also up for being captured? Because what some of the pirates are doing is getting a small rigid inflatable boat, filling it with explosives, mooring it under the bows and lashing it to the bows of the tanker, and then doing a kind of suicide bombing job on blowing up themselves and all the explosives and making a big hole in the hull, which would stop even quite a large vessel in its tracks. Okay, scariness. Pirates can be dissuaded from attacking by things like loud noise, water flooding, barbed wire across the decks, which make it very hard for them to board. But what if you, the tanker or the merchant ship, try to fire on them as they approach? Well, then they're quite capable of, from their small boat, which is launched from a mothership, which is perhaps 400 miles off coast. They come out in a small boat with a couple of outboards. And, oh, we're not pirates, we're just fishermen. We're guys out for a day off. Well, why have you got rocket launchers and AK-47s at the bottom of the boat? Well, it's very scary around here. There are pirates. You could get attacked. So, it sounds funny, but it's very difficult for a merchant ship captain to start firing at a group of guys like this because, don't know who they are. And there is no common agreement on rules of engagement. So what can the merchant ship do? We'll create a safe room and all the crew stay in the safe room until the pirates hopefully leave. And in the safe room have air conditioning, food and water and all the communications equipment. But then there is this problem with the lack of internationally agreed rules as to how merchant ships or navies can engage pirates. Okay, third way of combating piracy, which is fairly low cost and fairly non-threatening, which is the training of crew members. And some very good manuals and training programs have been created. And if 7 out of 8 ships that are attacked can repel pirates by good training, obviously this is one solution, but it's not completely foolproof. Pirates, when they've come a long way offshore and they're running out of fuel, become even more desperate to attack passing merchant shipping. Okay, combating piracy 4, the creation of a private navy. Now this is being created by an insurance company, but different countries, different organisations are taking completely separate and fragmented initiatives. I was trying to read an article, it was in Dutch a couple of days ago. I could see Piraten, I think that's the Dutch for pirates. I couldn't read any more of it, but I could see what it was about. And so lots of different countries are taking their own initiatives. And if you pay these guys with their private navy, and they've got 16 armed patrol boats, they will take you through a 3-day transit of the Gulf of Aden and through the dangerous pirate-infested areas, which might take 3 days is the most dangerous part, but it's around 8 days out of 50 days would be a very, very scary part of the voyage. Other initiatives. These are there's lots of different ideas that I gained from the literature about what people are doing. Many groups are lobbying for the United Nations to take the lead via the International Maritime Organization and the International Chambers of Commerce. Meanwhile, lots of independent shippers and owners like Maersk Line, that's been very much affected, are taking their own initiatives, suffering from vastly increased insurance rates. Meanwhile, there's some ideas about helping Somalia to escape from poverty and its bankrupt nation status. Somalia does very badly on Transparency International. I think it's one of the worst ranking countries there. If we could only help Somalia to become more economically developed, then maybe we can stamp out the piracy problem. Interestingly enough, The Economist wrote a number of articles about this issue and said, if countries are very, very, very poor, they don't have pirates because they can't afford the ships and the infrastructure and they haven't got the organisation and the networks. If they become much more wealthy and much more established and much more politically stable, then they could get out of piracy. But there's a dangerous gap in the middle where actually piracy could increase if they became incrementally slightly more well off. I think we have to think about, it's not just those guys in the boat holding their handheld rocket grenades. There's a whole industry and there's a whole organisation around these guys. And how much do we know about this? And the warlords who are funding all of the, who are making most of the money but are funding this, who are they, where they live? We don't know very much about them. Because some solutions have been this idea of trying to hunt down the pirate warlords. Okay, now, you might say, well, piracy is nothing new. It's been going on for thousands of years. So I thought I would look up what happened, piracy in the 17th century. And how was piracy stamped out hundreds of years ago? Maybe we can learn something from history. We talk about, we don't do this. So piracy was thriving for 10 years between 1604 and 1614 in England. And PhD theses have been written about this, and I found one. And there were 5 reasons why piracy went into decline in 1614. The first one was the navy in England, which had previously been very weak, was strengthened and had a new boss who was very strong. Okay, so strengthening the defence services. Secondly, the coastal communities which were buying the pirates' booty and doing business with them were discouraged. Now, nowadays it's more ransoms than cargoes, but similar issue. Thirdly, the English pirates had competition from the Dutch and the Spanish and decided to give up. Fourthly, the English pirate base in Morocco was captured by the Spanish. And fifthly, the pirate captains decided to go honest and become respectable and buy landed estates. I think it was in Italy, some of them, and were pardoned. So then became aristocrats and gave up being pirates. So I thought, are there any lessons for us out of all of this? And maybe, you see, the navies are still very weak and fragmented. The pirates still have customers or people who are willing to pay. The pirates, the Somalis have competition, but it seems like there's big business and there's room for a lot of competitors. Could we wipe out their pirate bases? Well, that sounds like a possible idea. But they might have all changed and difficult to track down. And maybe this last one about hunting down the pirate warlords, this might be a possible solution. But basically, there's a ton of material out there about what different countries and people are doing. And of course, I'm just reading it in English. They'll be in all different languages. And most of the literature is in the maritime press. It's in technical journals about shipping. And it was said by a number of authors that what if this was happening to airliners and airliners being hijacked on the same scale? Would it be different? Would the international initiatives and way of dealing with this be more active? Because we've still got a very big problem. We've got very large payment of, this is the annual costs of piracy. And we've got around 7 to 12 billion per year total, which is estimated to rise to about 15 billion in the next few years. So what does this comprise? Okay, payment of ransoms, raised insurance premiums, ship rerouting costs, purchasing of security equipment, navy investment. Prosecutions of pirates seems to be rather limited, and there is some coverage in the literature that pirates, once captured, are sent back to their home country to serve their prison sentences, which perhaps they don't necessarily serve, and come back out and start attacking ships again. A very little expenditure on anti-piracy organisations by comparison. Big costs to the economy, adding up to a very, very substantial amount. But this whole industry seems to be keeping going. And let me conclude by showing you, slightly humorous, but actually quite serious. This is obviously not a real one, but a recruitment advertisement for being a pirate. Low risk, high reward job, fresh air, sunshine, part-time work from your own boat. Earn 50 times your expected lifetime income in one day. Little experience needed, be the envy of your neighbours and friends. And this is very appealing to somebody who is in a very poor situation. Okay, there's a slight chance of death, but pirate fatalities have been very few. And okay, if it's a choice between 10% possibility of death and 90% possibility of big riches, you know, you can see why people are opting for the pirate career track. And the industry is continuing. Okay, thank you.